Chapter 1. Ethan Blackwood stood at the altar, his fingers tightening around the smooth fabric of his tailored suit. His heartbeat pounded like a war drum, but not from excitement. No, it was something much colder. A room filled with 100 guests, a floral archway that cost more than most people's homes, and a bride who was nowhere to be found. The whispers had started, murmurs rippling through the grand hall like an oncoming storm. The officiant shifted uncomfortably beside him. His best man Daniel cleared his throat. "Ethan, maybe she." The double doors burst open. For a fraction of a second, Ethan thought it was her, finally arriving, until he saw the person standing there. His mother. The expression on her face made his chest tighten. He didn't need to hear the words, but she said them anyway, loud enough for the entire crowd to hear. "She's gone." A deafening silence followed. Ethan Blackwood, the billionaire, the golden son of New York's elite, had just been abandoned at the altar. The woman he was supposed to spend the rest of his life with, Charlotte Kensington, had run away. And not just anywhere. "She left with Carter," his mother whispered. His stomach twisted. Carter, his business rival. The man who had spent years trying to take him down. The man who had just taken his fiancée too. Laughter. Someone in the back of the room tried to cover it, but he heard it anyway. The world began to spin. 5 hours later, the penthouse suite at the Blackwood Hotel was dark, except for the city lights filtering through the windows. Ethan sat on the couch, a whiskey glass in his hand, his tie undone, his world crumbling. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was Ethan Blackwood. He built empires. He controlled markets. He didn't get left behind. A cruel chuckle slipped past his lips. So much for that. Another knock at the door. He ignored it. Probably Daniel checking on him. The knock came again, followed by a hesitant voice. "Hello? Housekeeping?" Ethan frowned. The last thing he needed was some hotel worker seeing him like this. "Not now," he muttered. A pause. Then, softly, "Sir, I need to clean." He sighed heavily. "Then clean." The door opened a crack. A young woman stepped in hesitantly, her uniform crisp but slightly oversized, her brown hair tied back into a messy bun. She carried a cleaning cart, looking every bit the part of someone who didn't belong in his world. Except right now, neither did he. Her eyes flickered to the bottle beside him. She hesitated. "Would you like me to?" "No." His voice was sharp, too sharp. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a slow breath. "Just do your job." She nodded, rolling the cart inside, moving with quiet efficiency. He should ignore her. She was just a cleaner. A stranger. But the way she moved, careful, precise, yet unafraid, drew his attention. Unlike the people in his life who walked on eggshells around him, this woman treated him like any other guest. She didn't pity him, and that, strangely, made him look at her twice. Ethan Blackwood had spent his life ensuring that he was always in control. But tonight, as he sat in his luxury suite, nursing a bottle of whiskey and the sting of betrayal, he had never felt more powerless. The cleaner, just a worker, a nobody, moved through the room without a sound. Her small frame contrasted with the large, elegant space, yet she didn't seem intimidated by the luxury surrounding her. If anything, she looked used to it, like someone who had learned to exist in places she could never claim as her own. She dusted the shelves, avoiding the expensive whiskey bottles scattered on the glass table. She worked quickly but without rushing, like someone who knew that even rich men had limits to their patience. Ethan leaned back against the couch, watching her move. He shouldn't be paying attention to a hotel cleaner, especially not tonight when his entire life had just fallen apart. And yet, something about her held his attention. "Do you always clean at this hour?" he muttered. The woman paused, glancing at him. "Yes," a simple answer, no hesitation, no unnecessary words. He narrowed his eyes. "You don't seem nervous." "Should I be?" she asked, setting down a glass she had wiped clean. Ethan smirked, despite himself. "Most people are around me. Most people probably care what you think of them," she replied, meeting his gaze. "I just clean." Her words were blunt, but there was no malice in them, just honesty. And honesty was rare in his world. He let out a low chuckle. "What's your name?" She hesitated for the first time before answering. "Ava. Ava," he repeated, rolling the name over his tongue like it was something foreign. Simple. Uncomplicated, unlike everything else in his life. She nodded and returned to her cleaning, avoiding his gaze this time. For a moment, silence settled between them. Then Ethan spoke again. "Tell me something, Ava." She didn't look up. What? Do you think I look pathetic right now? This time, she did stop. Slowly, she turned toward him, her brown eyes flickering over the whiskey bottle, his loosened tie, and the deep shadows under his eyes. I think you look like a man who just lost something important, she said finally. And you don't know whether to be angry or broken about it. Ethan's jaw tightened. It wasn't the answer he expected. It wasn't the empty sympathy or the fake reassurance he usually got. It was real. I don't get broken, he muttered, looking away. Ava said nothing, but something in her expression told him she didn't believe him. And for the first time that night, Ethan Blackwood wondered why a stranger's opinion mattered more than the dozens of people who had surrounded him earlier that day. Chapter 2. Ava Carter didn't believe in fairy tales. She had stopped believing in them a long time ago, somewhere between her mother's last breath in a cheap hospital room and the pile of bills that never stopped coming. Dreams were for people who could afford them. She was not one of those people. That's why, as she finished her shift at the Blackwood Hotel and clocked out just before dawn, she pushed thoughts of the billionaire in the penthouse suite out of her mind. He was just another guest, another rich man drowning in problems that people like her would never understand. And yet, she had seen something in his eyes, something raw. A man who wasn't used to losing, a man who didn't know whether to be angry or broken. Her own words haunted her. You look like a man who just lost something important, and you don't know whether to be angry or broken about it. Ava shook her head, tugging her jacket tighter as she stepped into the crisp morning air. It wasn't her business. Men like Ethan Blackwood weren't her business. Ethan Blackwood never slept in. But today, as the morning sun bled through the massive glass windows of his penthouse suite, he found himself staring at the ceiling, the echo of a stranger's words running through his mind. I think you look like a man who just lost something important. And you don't know whether to be angry or broken about it. She was wrong. He wasn't broken. He was furious. Ethan sat up, running a hand through his hair. The whiskey bottle from last night sat untouched on the table beside him. He had stopped drinking after she left. Ava. A hotel cleaner with sharp eyes and a blunt tongue. He exhaled sharply, shoving the thoughts away. He had bigger problems to deal with. Grabbing his phone, he scrolled through his notifications. The media had erupted overnight. Runaway bride Ethan Blackwood left at the altar. Billionaire heiress Charlotte Kensington runs off with rival tycoon. Blackwood humiliated. The wedding that never was. Ethan clenched his jaw, his grip tightening around the phone. The headlines were merciless. His ex-fiancée and Carter were making headlines across every news outlet, flaunting their betrayal like a twisted victory. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Daniel, his best friend and right-hand man, stood on the other side, looking at him like he was a ticking bomb. We need to talk, Daniel said, stepping inside. Ethan threw the phone onto the table. I'm not in the mood for damage control. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's exactly why we need to talk. Ethan ran a hand over his face, sighing. I don't care what the media says. You should. Your stock value dropped 5% overnight. Investors are panicking. Let them panic. Daniel folded his arms. And what about you? What's your plan? Ethan stared at him. Plan? He should be thinking about that, about control, about rebuilding his image. But all he could think about was a woman who had wiped down his table without flinching, who had met his gaze without hesitation. Ethan exhaled sharply. I need a distraction. Daniel frowned. Ethan, but he wasn't listening anymore. His mind was already made up. Ava didn't expect to see him again. She had just started her next shift when she heard his voice. Where is she? She froze. Ethan Blackwood stood in the hotel lobby, dressed in an all-black suit, his presence demanding. Staff members scrambled around him, unsure whether to approach or run. Ava turned on her heel, hoping to slip away before he spotted her. No such luck. His gaze locked onto her. Ava. Her feet refused to move. He strode toward her, his blue eyes unreadable. We need to talk. Ava glanced around. People were watching. Staff, guests, her manager. She shook her head. I'm working. I don't care. Her pulse kicked up. You should, because I do. His lips twitched, the ghost of a smirk appearing. Then let's make it simple. How much do they pay you? She narrowed her eyes. Why? Ethan pulled out his phone, tapped a few buttons, and turned the screen toward her. A direct transfer, an absurd number, more money than she had seen in her entire life. Come with me, his voice was low, commanding. Ava stared at the screen, then at him. "Are you trying to buy me?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "No, I'm hiring you." "For what?" He met her gaze. "To be my distraction." Chapter 3. Ava Carter had seen a lot of things while working at the Blackwood Hotel. Celebrities throwing tantrums, high-profile businessmen losing their tempers, rich women drowning in designer shopping bags. But never in her entire time cleaning penthouse suites had she expected a billionaire to offer her a job like this, to be his distraction. Her fingers curled at her sides as she stared at Ethan Blackwood, her heart pounding. His offer still lingered between them like an unanswered question. The number on his phone screen wasn't just money. It was freedom, medical bills, rent, the never-ending debt she had been drowning in for years. She could make it all go away with one word. Yes, but instead, she said, no. Ethan's expression didn't change. "You haven't even thought about it." "I don't need to," she replied. "I already know this is a bad idea." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, like he wasn't used to being denied. "You'd rather keep scrubbing floors?" "I'd rather not be dragged into your mess," Ava shot back. Something shifted in his gaze. People were still watching, hotel staff, guests passing through the lobby, even her manager throwing her a warning glance. She was seconds away from being pulled aside and reprimanded for speaking to him like this. She needed to leave before this got worse. "I have work to do," she said, moving to step past him. Ethan's hand shot out, fingers grazing her wrist, just enough to make her pause. "Wait." Ava hesitated. The contact sent a jolt of heat through her skin, unexpected and unwelcome. She pulled her arm back, glaring at him. Ethan exhaled, looking frustrated for the first time. "I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do." She gave him a skeptical look. "You just offered me an insane amount of money to." "What? Stand next to you while the world watches?" "Yes," he said simply. She blinked. He wasn't even trying to sugarcoat it. "I need to control the media narrative," he continued. "They think I'm broken, that I lost. I need them to see that I don't lose." Ava folded her arms. "And you think hiring a cleaner to be your public distraction is the best way to do that?" A slow smirk tugged at his lips. "Why not? You're the only person in this entire hotel who isn't treating me like a victim." His words hit something deep inside her. She wanted to tell him that this wasn't her problem, that his life, his image, and his broken engagement had nothing to do with her. But the truth was, she was thinking about it, about the money, about the escape it could give her, and about the man standing in front of her, watching her with something sharp and unreadable in his gaze. She swallowed hard. "What exactly would this job require?" His smirk widened slightly. "You come with me to public events. Let the cameras see us together, nothing more." Ava studied him. "No sleeping with you?" she asked bluntly. Something dark flickered in his eyes, gone too fast for her to read. "No." His voice was quiet but firm. "Not unless you want to." Her pulse jumped. Ethan Blackwood was dangerous. Not because he was a billionaire, not because he had power, but because there was something else in his gaze, something that made her stomach tighten. "Do I get a contract?" she asked. His eyes gleamed. "If you want one." Ava inhaled sharply, looking away. She didn't belong in his world. She didn't want to be one of the women clinging to his arm for attention. But she did need a way out of the life she was trapped in, and he was offering it to her on a silver platter. Finally, she exhaled and said, "Fine, I'll do it." Ethan's smirk was slow, victorious. "Good," he said. "You start now." Chapter 4. Ava Carter had expected change when she accepted Ethan Blackwood's offer. She had expected things to be overwhelming, had braced herself for cameras, for scrutiny, for the suffocating presence of a billionaire whose world was nothing like hers. But she hadn't expected this. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. "Stand still," Ethan ordered. Ava scowled but obeyed. Her arms stiff as a woman in a sleek black suit circled her like a hawk, measuring, muttering numbers, and writing them down. After their conversation in the hotel lobby, Ethan had barely given her time to breathe before whisking her away in a car that probably cost more than her entire existence. The destination? A private designer showroom. Ava hadn't even had time to argue before she was being ushered into a space so elegant and expensive, it made her entire body itch. "You can't just buy me clothes like I'm some doll you need to dress up," she snapped. Ethan didn't even glance at her. He sat comfortably on a sleek leather couch, legs crossed, watching with mild amusement. I can, and I am. She shot him a glare. I have clothes. You have uniforms, he corrected. You need something else now. Ava clenched her jaw. She hated this, hated the idea of owing him anything. You agreed to the job, Ethan reminded her. This is part of it. She wanted to argue. She should argue. But the truth was, he was right. The media was already buzzing with the news of Ethan Blackwood's new companion. She had seen the headlines popping up on his phone as he scrolled through them on the way here. Ethan Blackwood moves on. Who's the mystery woman? New romance or PR stunt? From billionaire heiress to a maid? That last one had made her stomach twist. Ethan had barely reacted to the headlines, his expression unreadable as he read them. They're vultures, he had said casually. Ignore them. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one being dragged through the mud. Now, standing here while designers pulled dresses from racks and measured her like she was nothing more than a project, Ava wondered what the hell she had gotten herself into. One of the assistants, a sleek woman with dark red lips, held up a black evening dress. Mr. Blackwood, this one would be stunning on her. Ava stiffened. Ethan glanced up, his gaze sweeping over the dress before flicking to Ava. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Try it on, he said. Ava huffed. I don't need your approval. Then put it on for yourself, he countered, his voice smooth, controlled. A challenge. Her spine stiffened, but she snatched the dress and stalked toward the fitting room. 10 minutes later, Ava had never worn something so expensive in her life. The fabric slid over her skin like water, hugging her curves, flowing perfectly where it needed to. The neckline was elegant, the slit at her leg scandalous enough to make her hesitate. She turned slowly, staring at herself in the mirror. Was that her? For a second, she almost forgot who she was. Then Ethan's voice cut through the moment. Are you planning to stay in there all day? Ava rolled her eyes and pushed open the door. Silence. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. His sharp blue eyes ran over her, slow and assessing. Ava's skin heated under his gaze. Not bad, he murmured, his voice lower than usual, her breath caught. Was it her imagination, or was there something darker in his gaze? Something that had nothing to do with business? The air between them shifted. Ava cleared her throat and crossed her arms. So, am I dressed rich enough for you now? Ethan smirked. Almost. She rolled her eyes, but the truth was, she felt different, stronger, more in control, and that was dangerous. Later that evening, Ava stepped out of a sleek black car, her hand lightly resting on Ethan's arm. The flashing lights hit her like a tidal wave. Reporters shouted his name. Camera shutters clicked. The world wanted a piece of Ethan Blackwood, and now, by association, a piece of her. She clenched her jaw and forced herself to stand tall. Ethan leaned down slightly, his breath warm against her ear. Relax, he murmured. You look like you're about to bolt. She threw him a glare. I might. His smirk deepened, but there was something almost approving in his gaze. Nay. They walked forward together, entering the grand hall where an elite charity gala was being held. The moment they stepped inside, all eyes were on them. Whispers, curious glances, judging stares. Ava forced herself to keep her chin high. She could do this. She had to do this. But then, from across the room, she saw her. Charlotte Kensington, Ethan's ex-fiancée, standing next to Carter, the man she had left Ethan for. The tension in the room shifted. Ethan's body went rigid beside her, his jaw tightening. Ava felt the weight of Charlotte's gaze land on her, and then, slowly, the woman smirked. Game on. Chapter 5. Ava had never been in a room so suffocatingly rich. The ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers and golden decor, the scent of expensive perfume hanging thick in the air. Women in designer gowns floated around the space, their laughter delicate and controlled, while men in tailored suits exchanged quiet, calculating words. And in the center of it all stood her. Charlotte Kensington. Ava could tell exactly who she was before Ethan even reacted. The woman was stunning, tall, blonde, and effortlessly elegant. She wore a blood-red gown that clung to her body, her presence dripping with the confidence of someone who had been born into wealth and privilege. And beside her, Carter, the other billionaire in this twisted game. Ava wasn't sure what she expected Ethan to do when he saw them. Maybe he would tighten his grip on her arm. Maybe his body would stiffen. But instead, he simply smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. Ava had seen many expressions on Ethan Blackwood's face since meeting him. Arrogance, amusement, frustration. But this This was something else. It was strategy. She barely had time to react before he started walking toward them, taking her with him. Ava resisted the urge to yank her arm away. "Are we seriously doing this?" she muttered under her breath. Ethan's smirk deepened. "Absolutely. Great." They reached Charlotte and Carter within seconds. The tension in the air so thick Ava could feel it pressing against her skin. Charlotte was the first to speak. "Ethan," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with something between amusement and mockery. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Ethan tilted his head. "Strange. You should have known I wouldn't miss your grand entrance." Charlotte's lips twitched, but her eyes flickered toward Ava, assessing, calculating. And then she did something Ava should have expected. She ignored her, like she was invisible, like she wasn't worth acknowledging. Instead, Charlotte turned to Ethan, placing a delicate hand on his arm. "You look well," she said sweetly. "I was hoping we could—" Ava moved. She didn't even think about it. She just took a step closer to Ethan, smoothly sliding her hand up his chest before resting it lightly against his shoulder. Ethan's body tensed for the briefest moment before relaxing. His hand moved to her waist, fingers pressing into the fabric of her dress in silent approval. Ava smiled sweetly at Charlotte. "Hi," she said, voice perfectly polite. "You must be Charlotte." For the first time, real emotion flickered in Charlotte's gaze. It was quick, so quick Ava almost missed it, but it was there. Surprise and irritation. Ava had seen women like Charlotte before, the type who were used to controlling the room, to always being the center of attention. And right now, Ava had just stolen that attention. Charlotte's lips curved slightly. "And you are?" "Ava Carter," she said easily, letting Ethan's warmth at her side anchor her. Ethan's. She let the words hang. What was she exactly? His date? His hired distraction? Ethan decided for her. "My girlfriend," he said smoothly. Ava barely stopped herself from stiffening. Charlotte blinked. For the first time all night, Carter, her new billionaire, spoke. "You moved on quickly," he said, his tone amused. "Can't say I expected that." Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Neither did I. Ava knew that this was a game, that Ethan was using her as a tool in whatever silent war was brewing between him, Charlotte, and Carter. But for some reason, the way his fingers rested against her waist didn't feel like strategy. It felt real. Charlotte's expression hardened, but she recovered quickly. "Well," she said, smiling again, "I hope you two are very happy together." Ava recognized that tone. It was the kind women used when they didn't actually mean what they were saying. And when Charlotte's gaze flickered down to Ava's dress, assessing, critiquing, she knew what was coming next. "You look lovely, dear," Charlotte said, tilting her head slightly. "Tell me, where did you get that dress? A test? A trap?" Ava knew how this worked. Charlotte wanted to embarrass her, to catch her slipping. She could feel Ethan's gaze on her, waiting. Ava smiled. "Oh, I don't remember," she said innocently, tapping a finger against her chin. "Ethan just told his personal designer to handle it." Charlotte's lips twitched. Carter let out a quiet laugh. Ethan's fingers pressed a little tighter against her waist. Amusement, approval. "Well," Charlotte said, her smile a little less perfect now. "Enjoy your night, Ava." "Oh, we will," Ethan murmured. And with that, Charlotte and Carter disappeared into the crowd. The moment they were gone, Ava exhaled. Ethan chuckled. "Not bad." She shot him a glare. "I hate you," he smirked. "You loved every second of that." She opened her mouth to argue, but damn it. Maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. Chapter 6. Ava could still feel the weight of Charlotte's stare, long after she was gone. The entire interaction had left her rattled, not because she was intimidated, but because she had felt something she hadn't expected. Possessiveness. Not from her. From Ethan. The way his fingers had tightened around her waist, the way he had looked at her, the way he had called her his girlfriend without hesitation. She had expected this whole arrangement to feel fake, to feel like a transaction. But it didn't, and that was dangerous. Ethan led her through the gala, his grip light but firm on her lower back. People watched them, whispered about them. Who is she? Why her? Is he actually serious about this one? Ava ignored it, pretending it didn't affect her. Pretending she hadn't just spent the last half hour in a battle of wits with a billionaire heiress and somehow walked away winning. Ethan guided her toward the balcony, away from the noise, the flashing cameras, the suffocating weight of high society. She inhaled deeply, letting the night air cool her skin. He leaned against the railing beside her, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. You handled that well, he said. Ava huffed. I grew up around women like her. Ethan arched a brow. You did, she shrugged. Not in this world, but rich or poor, people like Charlotte exist everywhere. They thrive on control. Ethan smirked. And yet you didn't let her win. Ava turned her head to look at him. He was studying her, that same unreadable expression on his face. What? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was brief, fleeting, but it sent a shiver down her spine. His smirk faded, replaced by something else. Something dangerous. Something real. You surprise me, Ava, he murmured. Her breath hitched, and just like that, the moment was over. Ethan straightened, his mask slipping back into place. Come on, he said. It's time to go. The car ride was silent. Ava kept her hands folded in her lap, her mind still replaying the evening. The looks, the words, the way Ethan had touched her. This wasn't what she had signed up for. She was supposed to be a distraction, a temporary fix to his public humiliation. Then, why did she feel like she was slipping into something she couldn't control? Ethan sat beside her, one arm resting casually on the back of the seat, his eyes fixed on the city lights outside. Finally, she broke the silence. You didn't have to call me your girlfriend. His gaze flickered toward her, unreadable. It was necessary. For your reputation? A smirk played on his lips. Among other things, she frowned. Like what? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the whiskey bottle near the minibar, poured himself a glass, and took a slow sip. Ava watched the way his fingers wrapped around the crystal, the way his jaw tensed slightly as he swallowed. This man was a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve, but she wanted to, and that was the problem. By the time they reached Ethan's penthouse, Ava was exhausted. She expected him to send her back to her apartment, to remind her that this was a business arrangement and nothing more. Instead, he poured himself another drink and loosened his tie. Stay, he said casually. Ava blinked. You can take the guest room. He took a slow sip of whiskey, watching her. It's late. You might as well. She should say no. She should. But the truth was, her tiny apartment felt suffocating these days, and the thought of spending a night in a bed that didn't creak when she moved was tempting. Too tempting. Fine, she muttered. Ethan smirked. Good. She turned on her heel, heading toward the hallway, but his voice stopped her just before she disappeared into the guest room. Ava? She turned. He was leaning against the bar, his blue eyes darker than usual. Don't let tonight fool you, he said quietly. Ava frowned. What does that mean? His gaze locked onto hers, unreadable. This is still business. A flicker of something bitter curled in her chest. Right, she said, her voice cool. Of course. And then she shut the door behind her. Chapter 7. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the penthouse, mingling with the warm aroma of sizzling bacon and eggs. Ava stood barefoot in Ethan Blackwood's massive kitchen, flipping an omelet with practiced ease. She wasn't sure why she was doing this. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was her way of pretending that last night hadn't happened. Or maybe, just maybe, she wanted to prove something. Ethan might be the billionaire in this equation, but that didn't mean she had to lose herself in his world. So instead of slipping away quietly, she had decided to cook. Because this was something she could control. The penthouse was eerily quiet. She had expected Ethan to be awake by now. The man didn't strike her as someone who slept in. But the silence stretched on, and she found herself strangely at peace in his kitchen. She placed the omelet onto a plate, setting it down beside a steaming cup of black coffee, because, of course, Ethan seemed like the kind of man who drank his coffee bitter and strong. The sound of footsteps made her tense. She turned just as Ethan entered the kitchen, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, his hair tousled like he had just woken up. Ava swallowed hard. The man looked unfairly good in the morning. His eyes flickered to the table, then back to her. You cooked, he said, voice rough from sleep. Ava crossed her arms. I figured you might be hungry. Ethan arched a brow. That's unexpected, she shrugged. Don't read too much into it. He smirked but said nothing as he moved to the table, settling into a chair. He picked up his coffee first, taking a slow sip before glancing at her. Well, he asked. Ava blinked. Well, what? You made it. He gestured toward the plate. Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to sit and eat with me? She hesitated. Sharing a meal with him felt too comfortable, too intimate, but then she reminded herself. This was nothing. Just breakfast. just business. So she sat. The silence between them wasn't awkward. In fact, it was strangely normal. Ethan ate without complaint, his sharp, business-like exterior momentarily softened by the mundane act of having breakfast. For a moment, Ava almost forgot who he was. Almost. "This is good," he admitted after a few bites. Ava smirked. "Didn't think I could cook, did you?" "I didn't think you'd bother," she scoffed. "What, because I'm beneath cooking for a billionaire?" Ethan smirked. "No, because most people don't cook for me. They just want something from me." Ava hesitated, reading between the lines. Most people wanted money, influence, power. She could see it now, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he constantly measured people, always expecting an angle. Ava exhaled. "Well, I don't want anything from you." Ethan looked at her then. Really looked at her, as if he was trying to figure out whether she was lying. She held his gaze. And for the first time since they met, he didn't smirk. By the time Ava finally left Ethan's penthouse, her phone was exploding. She barely made it through the lobby before Meredith's name flashed across her screen. Ava sighed and answered. "Mir, what the hell, Ava?" Ava winced, holding the phone away from her ear. "You were on every gossip site this morning," Meredith shrieked. "The whole world thinks you're Ethan Blackwood's new obsession." Ava groaned. "It's fake, Mir." Meredith was silent for a moment. Then, "Are you sure about that?" Ava hesitated. The way Ethan had looked at her this morning, the way his gaze had lingered, the way his fingers had brushed against hers when he reached for his coffee. No, this was business. That was all it was, right? By the time Ava arrived at the hotel for her shift, the entire staff was buzzing. Whispers followed her as she walked through the corridors, hushed voices laced with curiosity and envy. She was with him again last night. Did you see the photos? She made him breakfast? Ava rolled her eyes and kept walking, pretending she couldn't hear them. But the moment she reached the housekeeping lounge, her manager, Mrs. Ellis, was waiting. Her expression was tight, her lips pressed into a firm line. "Ava," she said, her tone clipped. "My office. Now." Ava swallowed hard and followed her inside. Mrs. Ellis shut the door and turned, arms crossed. "Do you have any idea what kind of mess you've put me in?" Ava frowned. "What?" "The press has been calling," Mrs. Ellis snapped. "Trying to dig up information about you." Ava's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, of course," Mrs. Ellis huffed. "But that's not the point. The hotel is getting attention because of you. And not the good kind." Ava clenched her fists. "So, what? You're firing me?" Mrs. Ellis sighed. "No, but I am strongly advising you to think about what you're doing, because once you step into a world like Ethan Blackwood's, there's no stepping out." Ava exhaled. "I know what I'm doing." Mrs. Ellis gave her a look. "Do you?" Because, honestly, Ava wasn't sure anymore. Chapter 8. Ava had survived the gala. Barely. From the moment she stepped into that room, she knew Charlotte wouldn't let the night pass without playing a game. And Charlotte had played, testing, poking, trying to remind Ava that she didn't belong in this world. But Charlotte had made one fatal mistake. She underestimated Ava's ability to bite back. And now, as she sat in the back of Ethan's car, her heart still racing from the night's events, she could feel the tension hanging between them. Thick, unspoken, unavoidable. The city lights flickered through the window, casting golden shadows over Ethan's sharp features. His suit jacket was gone, the top few buttons of his shirt undone, his sleeves rolled up. He looked unraveled. And she knew it wasn't because of Charlotte. It was because of her. "You enjoyed that," Ethan murmured suddenly. Ava turned to him, raising a brow. "Enjoyed what?" he smirked. "Getting under her skin." Ava shrugged. "She tried to humiliate me, and instead, you humiliated her." His voice was dark, almost appreciative. "I didn't expect that." Ava held his gaze, the air between them shifting, heating. She should look away. She should remind herself that this was a business arrangement, that she wasn't actually his. But then Ethan reached out, fingers brushing against her thigh, just barely, just enough to make her suck in a breath, a warning, a challenge. Her heart hammered. "You keep pushing me," he murmured, his fingers tightening ever so slightly. Ava swallowed, her pulse skittering. "And you keep pretending you don't like it." Something flickered in his gaze. Heat, restraint, desire. For a second, she thought he might close the distance between them, that he might finally break. But then, with visible effort, he pulled away. He turned his head, exhaling slowly, his jaw tight. "This is still business," he muttered. Liar. They both knew it. By the time they reached the penthouse, Ava was exhausted. Her mind was still racing, her body still buzzing from the undeniable tension in that car. She needed space, distance, before she did something stupid. "I'll head to bed," she said quickly, already moving toward the guest room. But Ethan's voice stopped her. "Ava," she froze. His tone was different, not commanding, not mocking, just quiet. She turned slowly, her chest tightening at the way he was looking at her. Like he was trying to figure her out, like he was trying to resist something. "I meant what I said earlier," he said, his voice softer now. "You handled Charlotte well," Ava swallowed. "You thought I'd embarrass you?" His lips twitched, but there was no humor in his eyes. "No, I thought she'd make you run." Ava inhaled sharply. She wasn't stupid. She knew what he was really saying. Charlotte wasn't the first person to try to push her out of his world, and she wouldn't be the last. Ava's throat tightened, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "I don't scare easily." Something shifted in his expression. Approval, respect, something darker. For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between them felt smaller than it should have, the air thicker than it needed to be. And then Ethan nodded once, almost to himself. "Get some rest, Ava." A dismissal, a warning. Ava turned without another word, stepping into the guest room and shutting the door behind her. Her pulse was pounding, because for the first time since this started, she realized she didn't want this to be fake. And that was dangerous. Ava had barely opened her eyes the next morning before her phone started blowing up. She groaned, reaching for it with half-lidded eyes. 30 missed calls from Meredith. Ava frowned. What the hell? Before she could call back, a message popped up. "Meredith, Ava, wake the hell up! Meredith, check the news, now!" Ava blinked, shaking off the sleep as she clicked on the link Meredith had sent. Her stomach dropped. There, splashed across every major news outlet, were pictures. Her. With Ethan. Not just at the gala, not just looking elegant and composed, but in the car, his hand on her thigh. The way she had looked at him. The way he had looked at her. The article headline made her breath hitch. Ethan Blackwood's new obsession? Her pulse pounded. She could already see the comments. "She's nothing like his usual type. She's using him for money. Who even is she? They're clearly sleeping together." Ava's blood ran cold. This wasn't just speculation anymore. This was real, and the world was watching. Chapter 9. Ava's pulse thundered in her ears. The world was watching. She had woken up to her life splashed across every gossip site, to headlines that made her stomach twist into knots. She scrolled through them again, her breath shallow. Ethan Blackwood's new obsession. Is she more than just a fling? Mystery woman, or permanent fix? A hotel cleaner in his bed. Is this a Cinderella story or a scandal? And the worst part? The pictures. The ones taken in the car last night. Ethan's hand on her thigh. The way she had leaned into him. The way his eyes had darkened with something too dangerous to ignore. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, but she ignored it. She could already imagine the messages. Meredith freaking out. The hotel staff whispering. The entire world believing she was sleeping with a billionaire. Her stomach dropped. This was out of control. She needed to talk to Ethan. Ava stormed into the penthouse, not bothering to announce herself. She found him exactly where she expected, standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his phone in his hand, his expression unreadable. He turned as she approached, his blue eyes locking onto her. "You saw it. It wasn't a question." Ava clenched her fists. "The whole world saw it, Ethan." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not a big deal." Her jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me? People think I'm—" She cut herself off, flushing. Ethan tilted his head, his gaze too knowing. "Think you're what, Ava?" She swallowed. "You know exactly what they're saying," he smirked. And her stomach tightened. "You don't care?" "I care about controlling the narrative," he said smoothly, setting his phone down. "We can fight it, or we can use it." Ava blinked. "Use it?" Ethan took a step toward her, his presence dizzying. His fingers skimmed her wrist, his voice dropping lower. "If they want to believe we're together." He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "Why not let them?" Ava's heart skipped violently. "Ethan," she warned, but her voice was breathless. He smirked, his fingers lingering just a moment longer before he pulled back. "The press wants a show," he murmured. "Let's give them one." Ava's mind spun. She had known this arrangement would come with consequences. She hadn't expected to feel like she was drowning in them. A sharp knock at the door made Ava's stomach twist. Ethan exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders before striding toward it. When he pulled it open, Ava's blood ran cold, because standing there, looking like she had just won something, was Charlotte Kensington. A slow, knowing smirk curled her red-painted lips. Well, she purred, stepping inside without an invitation. I think we need to talk. Ethan's entire body tensed. Ava forced herself to keep her expression neutral, but her stomach churned. Charlotte looked too confident, too amused, like she had a weapon neither of them saw coming. Ethan exhaled sharply, shutting the door behind her. "What do you want, Charlotte?" she hummed, tapping a manicured nail against her chin. "I don't know," she said sweetly. "Maybe I was just curious." Ava narrowed her eyes. "Curious about what?" Charlotte's smirk deepened. "Oh, you know," her gaze flickered between them. "How quickly you've moved on." Ava clenched her fists. Charlotte turned back to Ethan, her eyes sharp. "You and I both know this isn't real." Ethan's jaw tightened. Ava's breath caught. Charlotte knew. She wasn't just speculating. She knew their arrangement was fake, and she was enjoying every second of it. "I mean," Charlotte continued, her voice light, "you never were the type to fall for someone so quickly." Ava braced herself for Ethan's response, for him to confirm it wasn't real, for him to remind Charlotte and her that this was still just business. But instead, Ethan's lips curled into a smirk. He stepped closer to Ava, his hands sliding onto her waist, right in front of Charlotte. And then he said the last thing Ava expected. "I guess you never really knew me then." Ava's heart stopped. Charlotte's smirk faltered just for a second. And in that moment, Ava realized something. Ethan wasn't just playing the game anymore. He was winning it. The moment the door clicked shut behind Charlotte, Ava exhaled sharply. She turned to Ethan, her chest tight. "What the hell was that?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tense. "I did what needed to be done." Ava's stomach churned. "You made it worse." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "No, I just made it believable." Her breath hitched. Because the way he was looking at her, like this was no longer about the media, no longer about Charlotte, like this was about them. And then, before she could think, before she could remind herself that this was supposed to be fake, Ethan's hand tightened on her waist, pulling her just a little closer. The air thickened. Ava swallowed hard, but she didn't move away. She couldn't, because she knew. This was the moment everything changed, and there was no going back. Chapter 10. Ava should have walked away after the kiss. She should have told Ethan it was a mistake, that she wasn't going to let herself fall into the trap of a man like him. But she didn't, because after that kiss, after the undeniable shift between them, Ethan didn't give her a chance to run. Instead, he made a decision. And it changed everything. "Move in with me." Ava froze. She had been standing near the penthouse window, arms crossed, trying to figure out how the hell she was supposed to recover from that kiss, when Ethan said the words that nearly knocked the breath out of her. She turned sharply. "What?" Ethan leaned against the bar, watching her, his expression unreadable. "You heard me," he said. Ava's heart pounded. "You can't be serious." His lips twitched. "I'm always serious." She stared at him. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Their deal was supposed to be temporary. A few public appearances, a carefully curated image, and then she would go back to her life. But now, Ethan Blackwood was asking her to move in with him. Ava crossed her arms. "Why?" Ethan sighed, setting his drink down. "Because I'm done pretending." Her stomach tightened. She opened her mouth, but he kept going. "The media isn't going to stop," he said. "Charlotte isn't going to stop. The rumors? They're already spiraling." Ava exhaled sharply. "And moving in together is supposed to fix that?" Ethan took a step toward her, slow, deliberate. "Yes," he said smoothly, "because once you're here, we don't have to fake anything." Ava's pulse skipped. There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty. He wasn't just asking her to act like they were together. He was asking her to be with him. For real, she swallowed. "This was never part of the deal." Ethan smirked. "Then let's make a new deal." Ava's breath caught. She should say no. She should remind him that this was all a business arrangement, that she wasn't supposed to get attached. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had already lost that battle. So instead, she exhaled slowly and said, "Okay." Moving into Ethan's penthouse should have been overwhelming. It should have felt foreign, suffocating, too much too fast. But strangely, it didn't. It felt natural. Too natural. Ava had her own space, a massive bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, a walk-in closet she barely knew what to do with, and a bathroom that looked like something out of a luxury spa. But despite all the space, she found herself constantly near him. Mornings where he drank his black coffee at the kitchen island while she made real breakfast, rolling her eyes at his terrible eating habits. Late nights where they sat in the living room, half watching the news while she teased him about how ridiculously expensive his furniture was. And then the moments in between, the quiet ones, the ones that felt too intimate for something that was supposed to be just a contract. Like the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his fingers brushed against hers when he handed her a glass of wine, the way her heartbeat betrayed her every time he walked into a room. Ava was drowning in him. And the worst part? She didn't even want to fight it. The media lost its mind. The moment the news broke that Ava had officially moved in, the headlines went insane. Ethan Blackwood and Ava Carter, is this the real deal? From maid to mistress. How did she do it? Inside the billionaire's new love life. Ava had tried to ignore it. She had told herself that the opinions of people who didn't know her didn't matter. But the comments, those were harder to shake. She's obviously using him. She's not even his type. This won't last. Gold digger. The word stung, and Ethan noticed. She had been scrolling through the articles one night, her expression carefully blank, when suddenly his hand closed over her phone, pulling it away. "Stop," he murmured. Ava frowned. "I wasn't." "Yes, you were," he said flatly. "And I don't care what they say," she exhaled. "Maybe you don't, but I do." Ethan studied her, his blue eyes sharp. "Then let me make something clear." Ava swallowed as he leaned in, his voice dropping lower. "They don't matter," he murmured. "What matters is that you're here, with me." Her heart stuttered. And for the first time since this started, she believed him. It happened late one night. The storm outside was loud, thunder rolling in the distance, rain beating against the windows. Ava had been lying in bed, trying to sleep, trying to ignore the way her mind wouldn't stop spinning, when suddenly there was a knock at her door. She sat up, blinking. "Yeah?" The door opened slowly. Ethan stood there, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly tousled. Ava's breath caught. He didn't say anything at first. Then, "I couldn't sleep," Ava swallowed. "Me either." Silence stretched between them. Something unspoken, dangerous. And then, Ethan stepped inside. Ava's pulse hammered. Ethan, but he was already walking toward her, already reaching for her. And when he cupped her face, tilting her chin up, she didn't pull away. She never wanted to. And this time, when he kissed her, she kissed him back. For real. Chapter 11. Ava hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to wake up to Ethan Blackwood's proposal. She had barely pulled on her robe, stepping out of the bedroom when she found him sitting in the living room, dressed in a crisp black suit, sipping his morning coffee like he hadn't just turned her world upside down. Ava crossed her arms, staring at him. "You want a what?" Ethan set his coffee down, tilting his head as he studied her. Unbothered. Unshaken. Completely serious. "Marry me," he said smoothly. Ava's heart skipped violently. "You're insane," Ethan smirked. "Possibly." She gaped at him. "This was never part of the deal." "The deal changed," he said simply. Ava swallowed hard. "Ethan, this isn't just something you do to prove a point. Marriage is—" He cut her off. "Marriage is exactly what we need." Her breath caught. He stood up then, closing the distance between them, his hand reaching out to tuck a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. Ava's stomach flipped. "Think about it," he murmured. "Once we're married, the media stops questioning us. Charlotte stops trying to prove this isn't real. The entire world knows you're mine." Her pulse skipped. "You say that like I'm some kind of possession." Ethan's gaze darkened. "You're not." His fingers traced down her jaw, tilting her chin up. "But you are mine." Ava shivered. She should argue. She should tell him this was insane. But deep down she knew. She had already lost herself to him. And now he was making it permanent. The moment they stepped into the courthouse, Ava's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the judge's words. This was real. This wasn't a game. She was about to become Ava Blackwood. She swallowed, stealing a glance at Ethan beside her. He was completely calm, signing the papers like he was closing another billion-dollar deal. When it was her turn, her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the pen. She hesitated. Then, she signed. And just like that, she wasn't just Ethan's public distraction anymore. She was his wife. Daniel Carter, Ethan's best friend and business partner, nearly choked on his drink when he heard the news. "You got married? Daniel stared at Ethan like he had lost his mind. Just like that, Ethan smirked. Yes. Daniel turned to Ava, clearly baffled. And you agreed? Ava shrugged, still trying to process everything herself. Apparently, Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Okay, wow. Just wow. I mean, congrats, but he narrowed his eyes at Ethan. What the hell happened to Ill never marry again? Ethan didn't even blink. She's different. Ava's breath caught. Daniel snorted, shaking his head. Yeah, no kidding, he grinned, turning back to Ava. Well, welcome to the madness. Hope you know what you're in for. Ava laughed, but deep down she knew. She had no idea what she was in for. Because being Ethan Blackwood's wife, that came with power and danger. Ava hadn't expected to enjoy being his wife so much. But once they moved back into the penthouse, she realized something. Ethan wasn't used to being taken care of. He had spent his entire life in control, managing everything, expecting the world to cater to him. So when Ava started doing small things for him, things no one else ever had, it caught him off guard. She woke up before him, making him coffee just the way he liked it. She sent his assistant home early, making him take a break from work. She massaged his shoulders after a long day, watching his usually tense body melt under her touch. And the biggest surprise? She cooked for him. One night, after a long day at work, Ethan walked into the penthouse to find Ava in the kitchen, a full meal laid out on the dining table. He stopped in his tracks, staring. Ava smirked. You look like you've never seen food before. Ethan's gaze flickered to the dishes. I just wasn't expecting this. Ava leaned against the counter. You're my husband now, Ethan. You should get used to it. Ethan's jaw tensed, his blue eyes locking onto hers. And then he crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbed her by the waist, and kissed her senseless. Ava gasped, gripping his shirt, melting into him as he kissed her like he was starving. When he finally pulled back, his breath was ragged, his grip still firm on her waist. His voice was hoarse when he murmured, I could get used to this. Ava's stomach flipped. And that's when she realized this wasn't just a contract anymore. This was real, and she was falling for him completely. Chapter 12, Ava should have known this would happen, that the moment she became Ethan Blackwood's wife, he wouldn't be content with just a name on a paper. He wanted all of her, and tonight, he was going to take her. The rain outside pattered against the windows, soft and rhythmic, as Ava stepped out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her damp body. Ethan was already waiting. He leaned against the headboard, his black dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes burning as they tracked her every move. Ava swallowed, her breath hitching. He looked dangerous, unshaken, completely in control. Her fingers tightened around the towel. You're staring, Ethan smirked. I have every right to. Ava's stomach flipped. She had spent weeks pretending that this was just business, that their marriage was just a convenient arrangement. But tonight, there was no pretending. Ethan rose from the bed, his movements slow, deliberate. Ava's breath caught as he closed the distance, his fingers brushing against the edge of her towel. She should have pulled away. She should have told him they needed more time. But she didn't, because the moment his lips met hers, she was gone. The towel dropped. Ethan growled, his hands sliding down her body, pinning her against him, his breath ragged. You're mine now, he murmured against her skin. Ava shivered, gripping his shoulders as he lifted her, pressing her against the bed, his body caging her in. Say it, he commanded. Ava's heart pounded. Ethan, his grip tightened. Say it, she exhaled sharply, her lips trembling as she whispered. I'm yours. And then there was no more talking, only Ethan, claiming every piece of her. Ethan woke first. It wasn't the alarm that roused him. It wasn't the city noise. It was her. Ava lay beside him, bare beneath the sheets, her dark hair messy against the pillows, her breathing soft. His wife, something inside him tightened. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't name, something dangerous, something permanent, because now that he had her, there was no letting her go. Ava had never been to Ethan's office before, so when she stepped through the Grand Blackwood Enterprises building, holding the carefully packed homemade lunch, she didn't expect the reaction she got. The moment she walked in, every employee froze. Whispers rippled through the floor. That's her, his wife. Ethan Blackwood is actually married? She brought him lunch? Ava sighed, adjusting the bag in her hands. She reached the receptionist desk, offering a small smile. I'm here for Ethan. The woman behind the desk, Rebecca, according to her name tag, looked utterly stunned. You made him lunch?" she blurted. Ava frowned. "Is that weird?" Rebecca blinked rapidly, like she couldn't process what was happening. Yeah," she said. "I mean, he doesn't do relationships, or, domestic stuff." Ava's lips twitched. "Well, he does now," and with that she walked toward his office. Ethan had never been interrupted in a meeting before, so when the door to his conference room opened and Ava stepped inside, every single executive at the table stiffened. Ethan's brows lifted. His wife, in his office, with food. A slow, dangerous smirk spread across his face. "Ava," he murmured, leaning back in his chair. "This is unexpected." Ava ignored the gaping men in suits and placed the bag on the table. "You forgot to eat breakfast." The entire room fell silent. Ethan's eyes darkened. His wife had brought him lunch. His entire world shifted. He stood slowly, moving around the table until he was standing right in front of her, his voice low, possessive. "You made this?" Ava nodded. Ethan's chest tightened. No one had ever taken care of him before. Not like this. Not like her. And something inside him snapped. In front of everyone, Ethan slid his hand around her waist, pulling her close, his voice rough. "You're full of surprises, Mrs. Blackwood." Ava flushed, glancing around at his stunned employees. But Ethan, he didn't care, because she was his now. And the whole world was going to know it. When Ava left, the entire office buzzed with energy. Daniel, Ethan's best friend, strode into his office, grinning like a lunatic. "Okay," he said, dropping into a chair. "What the hell was that?" Ethan sipped his coffee, unbothered. "What?" Daniel gaped at him. "Your wife just brought you homemade lunch like a goddamn 1950s housewife, and you nearly devoured her in front of your entire boardroom." Ethan smirked. "Your point?" Daniel shook his head. "The point, you possessive bastard, is that everyone is losing their minds. Your employees? Jealous as hell." I walked past Rebecca at the front desk and she looked like she was ready to cry. Ethan's smirk deepened. "Good." Daniel groaned. "You're so damn smug. It's disgusting." Ethan leaned back. "Let them be jealous." Daniel rolled his eyes. "God, you're actually in love, aren't you?" Ethan didn't answer. Because the truth was, he already knew the answer. And soon, Ava was going to know it too. Chapter 13. Ava had always known that being Ethan Blackwood's wife would come with challenges. She had expected the media's scrutiny. She had expected the whispers. She had expected the stares of jealous employees every time she walked into his office. But what she hadn't expected was falling so deeply for him. And now, as she sat across from him at dinner, his blue eyes dark and unreadable, she realized she had already lost herself to him completely. Ethan had taken her to one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. The kind of place where billionaires sealed deals and celebrities were treated like royalty. Ava should have been used to it by now. But when they walked inside, and the entire room turned to stare, she felt her breath catch. Because tonight, Ethan wasn't just introducing her as his wife. He was declaring her as his forever. They had barely sat down when a familiar voice interrupted. Well, Charlotte purred, stepping up to their table. "Isn't this cozy?" Ava's stomach twisted, but she refused to show it. Ethan didn't even look at Charlotte. Instead, he reached across the table, taking Ava's hand in his. His touch was possessive, firm, a silent message to everyone watching. And then he spoke. "Did you need something, Charlotte?" Charlotte's lips twitched, but her eyes flickered to their joined hands, and Ava saw it. The first crack in her perfect facade. Ava lifted her chin, smirking. "You seem surprised." Charlotte's smile was tight. "I suppose I am. You moved in, you took his name, and now you're playing the dutiful wife." Ava didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to Ethan, her voice smooth, teasing. "Am I doing a good job, darling?" Ethan's lips curved slightly, his thumb brushing against her wrist. "You're perfect," he murmured. Charlotte's expression darkened. For the first time, she had lost control. And she knew it. "Enjoy your evening," Charlotte said stiffly, turning on her heel. Ava watched her retreat, her heart still pounding. But then Ethan squeezed her hand, drawing her back to him. His gaze was steady, full of something unshakable. And that's when she knew. She wasn't just playing the role of his wife anymore. She was his. And he had just made sure the entire world knew it. Ava should have known Charlotte wouldn't give up easily. Because the very next morning, as she scrolled through her phone, a new headline nearly made her drop her coffee. Ethan Blackwood's wife exposed, the woman he doesn't really love. Her blood ran cold. The article was full of twisted lies, rumors about how she had trapped him, speculation that their marriage was just a contract, and worst of all, a statement from Charlotte herself. I know Ethan. He doesn't fall in love, and he definitely doesn't marry for it. Ava's stomach twisted painfully. Because even though she wanted to ignore it, even though she wanted to pretend it didn't hurt, the truth was, some part of her was terrified. Charlotte was right. Ava barely had time to process before the penthouse door swung open violently. Ethan stepped inside, his jaw clenched, his entire body radiating dangerous fury. His phone was in his hand, and she could hear Charlotte's voice on the other end, mocking, taunting. Ethan's expression darkened as he lifted the phone to his ear. His phone was in his hand, and she could hear Charlotte's voice on the other end, mocking, taunting. Ethan's expression darkened as he lifted the phone to his ear. You made a mistake, Charlotte. His voice was lethal, dangerously low. A mistake I won't let you recover from. A pause. Then, I'm going to bury you. Ava's breath hitched. Ethan ended the call, tossing the phone onto the counter before turning to face her. His blue eyes were stormy, his hands balled into fists. Ava swallowed. Ethan? He was in front of her in seconds, caging her against the wall, his presence overwhelming. Do you believe her? His voice was hoarse, raw. Do you think I don't want you? Ava hesitated. Ethan's jaw tightened. Because if you do, his hands slid down her waist, his grip firm, possessive. Then I need to remind you who you belong to. Ava shivered, her breath shallow. You're mine, Ava, he murmured. My wife, my everything. Her heart pounded violently. Say it, his voice was a command. Ava's lips parted, her pulse skittering. She knew this was it, the moment she had to decide, fight it or fall completely. And deep down she knew. She was already his. So she exhaled softly and whispered, I'm yours, Ethan. And just like that, his restraint snapped completely. Chapter 14. Ava had spent her entire life standing on the sidelines, watching other people be chosen, be wanted, be loved. But now, she was Ethan Blackwood's, and for the first time she felt it completely. Because tonight, he was going to show her. Ava barely had time to process his words before Ethan's lips crashed against hers. It wasn't a kiss, it was a claiming. Raw, unyielding, desperate. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her flush against him, his body heat consuming her. Ava gasped against his mouth, but Ethan didn't let her pull away. Mine, he murmured, his voice gravely, his breath hot against her skin. Ava's pulse thundered. Ethan, his grip tightened. You're mine, Ava, he growled, and tonight I'm going to make sure you never forget it. Her breath hitched. And then? He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her toward their bedroom, his steps purposeful, commanding. Ava's stomach flipped. Ethan, wait. No more waiting, he murmured against her ear. And then he closed the door behind them and claimed her completely. Ethan woke to the soft warmth of Ava's body curled against him. His wife, his forever. The world had spent weeks doubting them, calling their marriage a scandal, questioning whether they were real. But this was real. He tightened his grip around her waist, pulling her closer, his lips brushing against her bare shoulder. Ava stirred slightly, blinking up at him sleepily. Ethan smirked. Morning, Mrs. Blackwood. Ava flushed, her lips parting slightly. You're awake? His eyes darkened. I didn't get much sleep. Her cheeks burned, and she hid her face against his chest. You're insatiable, Ethan chuckled, pressing a slow, lingering kiss to her forehead. Only with you. Ava's heart stuttered, because the way he said it, the quiet truth in his voice, it wasn't just sweet talk, it was a promise. She had never been loved like this, and now she didn't know how to live without it. Ava had expected some backlash after the public saw how serious Ethan was about her, but she wasn't expecting the outright jealousy. The moment she stepped into Blackwood Enterprises, carrying a carefully packed lunch, every employee on the executive floor stared and whispered, She's really his wife. She actually brought him lunch? She's so lucky. If only he looked at me like that. Ava ignored them, head held high as she walked straight to Ethan's office. His assistant, Rebecca, looked stunned when she saw her. You're bringing him food? Rebecca asked. Ava smirked. Yes, is that weird? Rebecca cleared her throat. No, it's just, he's never let anyone take care of him before. Ava's heart softened. Well, he was going to have to get used to it. She knocked once before stepping inside. Ethan was at his desk, focused on a business report, but the moment he saw her, His entire expression changed. His eyes darkened, his body tensed slightly, and then a slow smirk spread across his lips. Ava. Her stomach flipped at the way he said her name. She held up the bag. I brought lunch. Ethan's smirk faded, replaced by something softer. Something real. He stood, crossing the room in 3 long strides, taking the bag from her hands before pulling her close. His lips brushed against her ear. No one's ever done this for me before, he murmured. Ava's chest tightened. She wrapped her arms around him, pressing her forehead against his. Well, she whispered, I'm your wife now. Get used to it. Ethan exhaled slowly, his fingers curling against her waist, and then he kissed her in front of everyone. Right there, in the middle of his office, in front of his jealous employees. Daniel and the office's reactions. When Ava finally left, the entire office was buzzing. Daniel, Ethan's best friend, strode into the office, grinning like a lunatic. Oh my God, he said, dropping into a chair. You really went soft, Ethan smirked. Shut up, Daniel leaned forward. You kissed her in front of the entire staff. Do you know how many women were devastated by that? Ethan raised a brow. Good, Daniel laughed. Wow, you really don't care, do you? Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking. No, he said simply, because she's mine and that was the end of the conversation. Of course, Charlotte wasn't done. That night she showed up at the penthouse trying one last time to break them. She walked in, fake concern dripping from her voice. Ava, she sighed. I just wanted to see if you were okay. You know Ethan doesn't really... She didn't get to finish, because Ethan, he cut her off immediately. You don't belong here, Charlotte. Charlotte stiffened. Excuse me? Ethan's expression was cold, final. You lost. Accept it and leave. Charlotte gaped at him, but Ethan wasn't done. He stepped behind Ava, wrapping an arm firmly around her waist, his voice firm, unyielding. I love my wife, he said smoothly, brushing his lips against Ava's temple. Ava's stomach flipped violently. Did he just say? Charlotte froze completely. Yes, Ethan said, smirking slightly. I do. Ava's chest ached, because the way he said it, the way his hand tightened around her, it wasn't a lie. Charlotte's face twisted, but she knew. She had lost. She stormed out without another word. And the moment she was gone, Ava turned to Ethan, her heart racing. Ethan tilted her chin up, his eyes softening. I meant it, he murmured. I love you, Ava. Ava's breath hitched, her chest swelled painfully, and then she threw her arms around him, pressing her lips to his, because she loved him too. And now, she was finally ready to admit it. Chapter 15. Ava Blackwood had everything she never knew she wanted. A husband who worshipped her. A life filled with love. A future she never dared to dream of. But nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The moment she realized she was pregnant. Ava stood in the bathroom, staring at the test in her hands, her heart racing. 2 pink lines. Positive. Her stomach flipped, her breath caught in her throat. Pregnant. She pressed a hand to her flat stomach, disbelief washing over her. A baby. Ethan's baby. She felt a rush of emotions, joy, shock, excitement, and the tiniest bit of fear. Because Ethan Blackwood, was a man who had spent his entire life in control, and this was something he could never have planned for. Ava waited until dinner to tell him. She had cooked his favorite meal, set the table, tried to act normal. But Ethan Blackwood knew his wife. He knew when something was off. He sat across from her, watching her intently, his blue eyes sharp. Ava, she swallowed. Yes, he tilted his head. What's going on? Ava's stomach tightened. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his, her voice soft. I'm pregnant, Ethan. Silence. Ethan froze completely. For the first time since she met him, he looked genuinely speechless. Then, he exhaled sharply, pushing back from the table. Ava's heart pounded. Ethan? Before she could say another word, he was in front of her, dropping to his knees, his hands sliding over her stomach, his fingers trembling slightly. His head lowered, his forehead pressing against her belly. Ava's chest ached. Ethan never lost control, but right now, he was completely undone. A baby, he whispered, his voice rough. Our baby. Ava ran her fingers through his hair, tears burning her eyes. He looked up at her, his expression full of something she had never seen before. Pure, unfiltered emotion. I love you, he murmured. And I already love this baby, more than I can put into words. Ava laughed softly, pulling him up and pressing a kiss to his lips. Good, she whispered. Because we're going to be parents, Ethan. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Blackwood, the man who had once believed love made people weak, felt truly, completely whole. Ethan had never been afraid of anything. But the night Ava went into labor, he was terrified. She gripped his hand as a contraction hit, her face contorted in pain, and Ethan, the billionaire who had built an empire, who had faced boardroom wars and ruthless enemies, had never felt so powerless. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "You're strong, Ava. You've got this." Hours passed, and then the sound that changed his life forever, a baby's first cry. Ethan's chest clenched painfully as he looked down at the tiny, perfect human in the doctor's hands. His son, his family. The nurse gently placed the baby in Ava's arms, and Ethan swore his heart stopped completely. Ava looked exhausted but radiant, her eyes filled with tears of joy. Ethan leaned down, his lips brushing against her temple as he gazed at their child, their son. He ran a shaking finger over the baby's tiny fist, his voice low, full of emotion. "Hey, little guy," he murmured. "I'm your dad." The baby fisted his finger, and something inside Ethan snapped completely. How he had built empires, he had made billions, he had won battles no one else could. But this was his greatest achievement. Ava looked up at him, her smile soft and full of love. "You're a dad, Ethan." Ethan's throat tightened, and for the first time in his entire life he felt something he had never felt before. True, unshakable peace. Years passed, but Ethan never changed. He was still the ruthless, dominant billionaire the world feared. But at home, he was something else entirely. He was a devoted husband, still utterly obsessed with Ava, still touching her every chance he got, still worshiping her like she was the most precious thing in his world. And now, he was a father of 3. His eldest son, Leo, was already a mini version of him, confident, smart, and protective over his younger siblings. Their daughter, Elise, was her father's weakness, the only person who could make the great Ethan Blackwood bend to her every whim. And their youngest, Noah, was a wild, energetic mama's boy who had inherited Ava's fierce spirit. Ethan loved them fiercely, but nothing compared to his love for Ava. One evening, as they sat outside in their garden watching their kids play, Ethan pulled Ava onto his lap, his arms wrapping tightly around her waist. Ava laughed. "Ethan, the kids are watching." Ethan smirked. "Let them watch. I want them to know how much I love their mother." Ava rolled her eyes, but her heart melted, because no matter how much time passed, Ethan never changed. He was still hers, and she was still his, forever. The end. Written by Maria. Thank you all for taking the time to dive into this story with me. I truly appreciate your support and love hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey filled with passion, drama, and unexpected twists, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. There's so much more to come, and I can't wait to share it all with you. Stay tuned for more incredible stories, and as always, thank you for being part of this amazing journey. See you in the next one.